Friends, welcome to Biology Made Easy. Today in this video, we'll discuss what are the deficiency symptoms as well as the toxicity symptoms. That means symptoms of deficiency and toxicity. So while discussing the individual measure and micro elements, we have discussed some of the symptoms, deficiency symptoms. But today we'll summarize all these things. So first let us discuss what are the symptoms of deficiency, then we'll go to toxicity. Usually, as we have discussed in the earlier videos, that the different essential elements they are required by the plant body, without which the growth or development or reproduction will not be complete. But to what extent they are required? Because if the major elements, there may be anything extra, there will be no problem. But when there will be shortage of these elements, what will happen? So naturally, there will be some deficiency symptoms. But what is this level below which we will get that deficiency symptoms? So that level is known as the critical level. The critical level. That means for each element, there is a particular concentration of that element. If that element will be less than that concentration, then we will get deficiency symptoms. And if the deficiency symptoms are for NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, we call it as the critical deficiency. Critical deficiency. But for others, usually we call it is simply the deficiency symptoms. Now when the deficiency symptoms, otherwise also we call them as hunger signs. Hunger signs. Now when these symptoms will appear, these symptoms may be morphological, they may be morphological, physiological, or biochemical. But when there will be some deficiency, we cannot see the physiological and biochemical abnormalities, the signs we cannot mark. But the morphological differences we can easily observe from outside. But these morphological differences which we will mark from outside, that again varies from element to element. Suppose in one plant there is a deficiency of nitrogen, then whatever symptoms are observed, it will be different in case of sulfur, again different in case of phosphorus, or different in case of calcium. That means for different elements, we will observe different types of the deficiency symptoms. That is number one. The other aspect, again, this symptom will appear in which part of the plant body, whether in the leaves or flowers or the branches or in the root or in the upper part of the plant body or the lower part body. That again depends upon the mobility of these different elements, because some elements are mobile, some elements are immobile. Those elements which are mobile, immediately they will be transported to the top part of the plant body, that is shoot apex and leaf apex. But those which are immobile, they will remain in the lower part of the plant body, they will not go to the top of the plant body. So in that case, what will happen? In that case, those which are mobile elements, they will be in the apical parts of the plant body. So if there will be some deficiency symptoms, that will be observed first in the older and senescent parts. This is very important from examination point of view. Suppose let us take the example of mobile elements. And the example of mobile elements is usually the nitrogen, then nitrogen, potassium and magnesium. These are the mobile elements. So since these are mobile, when after absorption by the roots, they will move to the top part of the plant body. But when one of these will be deficient, naturally the lower, the older, the senescent parts will suffer first. So in case of mobile elements, the old and senescent parts, parts, in these parts, these symptoms will appear first. Symptoms will appear first. But if we take the case of immobile elements, immobile, for example, let us take the calcium. Calcium is immobile element. So in this case, what will happen? Since it is immobile, it will be in the lower part of the plant body. That is the mature leaves and branches. It will not be found in the upper part. So when this calcium, which is immobile, will be deficient, then naturally the first symptoms will appear in the young parts of the plant body. The symptoms will appear in the young parts like the young leaves or tips. It will be first observed. So this is very, very important from examination point of view. Then what are the common symptoms that are seen when there is a deficiency of a particular element? So usually the different deficiencies are symptoms. If we discuss the different types of symptoms, then one of the important symptoms is chlorosis. The second symptom is necrosis. The third symptom is inhibition of cell division. The fourth one is delayed flowering. Then the fifth one is premature leaf and bud fall, and there will be also stunted growth. These are some of the common symptoms when there is a deficiency of any one of the elements. But when a particular element is deficient, all the symptoms will not be found. Only one or two or three may be found, or a combination of some. But whenever there is a deficiency of an element, it doesn't mean that all the deficiencies will be found. It will vary from element to element. For example, now this chlorosis can be observed if there will be deficiency of several elements, and there are 8 elements. If any one of them is absent, we'll see chlorosis there. So what are these elements? Now one is nitrogen, potassium, then magnesium, then sulfur, then iron, then there is molybdenum, then zinc, and also molybdenum. Then there is a manganese also. So you see there are 8 elements. When any one of these is deficient, it will cause chlorosis. Similarly, if we take the case of necrosis. Necrosis will be caused by 4 elements like calcium, magnesium, then potassium and copper. That means here 4 elements can cause this. Now if we go to the inhibition of cell division, then inhibition of cell division can be caused by nitrogen, then potassium, then sulfur, and also by molybdenum. And the delayed flowering, this can be caused by nitrogen, sulfur, and also molybdenum. So from this table, let us observe certain things. You see, when any one of these 8 elements, nitrogen, potassium, magnesium, sulfur, iron, molybdenum, zinc, or manganese, when any one of them is absent, there will be chlorosis. Similarly, when any one of these 4 elements, calcium, magnesium, potassium, and copper is absent, it will lead to necrosis, means the appearance of dead cells. And when any one of these 4 will be absent, then it will lead to inhibition of cell division, and any one of these 3, then it will lead to delayed flowering. That means What is the conclusion? Listen very carefully. That means a single symptom can be caused by several elements. You see, chlorosis can be caused by 8 elements. Necrosis can be caused by 4 elements. Inhibition of cell division can be caused by 4 elements, and delayed flowering by 3 elements. That means this single symptom, I am writing here, this single symptom can be caused by several elements. It can be caused by several elements. So this is one. This is suppose let us write it as conclusion 1. Now what is the other one? One element can cause several symptoms. Suppose you see, in how many symptoms the nitrogen is present? Nitrogen is present in case of chlorosis. It is present in case of inhibition of cell division. It is present also in case of delayed flowering. That means when there will be deficiency of nitrogen, it can cause all these 3 symptoms. Similarly, you take the case of sulfur. Sulfur, if sulfur is deficient, it will cause chlorosis, inhibition of cell division, and delayed flowering. Similarly, you can take the molybdenum. The molybdenum, in its absence, there will be chlorosis, then inhibition of cell division, and also delayed flowering. That means there are 2 opposite things. A single symptom can be caused by several elements. Similarly, the same element can cause several symptoms. So the second conclusion is the same element can cause several symptoms. So when we are observing certain deficient symptoms or hunger signs in a plant, and that can be caused by several elements, how will ascertain it that this is due to deficiency of that particular element? That is very important. So for this, what we have to do? We have to observe all the symptoms. Because suppose in one case there is a chlorosis, then there is a inhibition of cell division, then delayed flowering, there will be some other symptoms. So all the symptoms we have to study, then we have to compare it with a standard table. Because scientists have prepared a standard table, and we have to compare how many symptoms are observed due to the deficiency of that particular one. Then only we can will be certain that this particular the symptoms are due to deficiency of that particular element. Otherwise, will lead to confusion. Suppose there is a deficiency of zinc, but and due to that chlorosis is there, but we will supply it with molybdenum or manganese or magnesium or something else. Then the problem will not be solved. So this is very important. So these are the different symptoms of deficiency. Now let us discuss what is the toxicity and the symptoms. Now we have discussed the role and deficiency of different macro and micro elements. So suppose let us start discussing the toxicity. Now suppose let us take the case of macro elements. The macro elements, they may be in high quantity or they may be in a low quantity. Low quantity means below critical concentration. So when they are present in very low quantity, it will lead to deficiency symptoms. That we have discussed. And when the concentration will be very high, nothing will happen. Because macro elements means what? They are present in a greater concentration, greater than 1 to 10 milligram per gram dry weight of the plant body. So if their quantity will be more, then there is no problem. But if it is less than a particular concentration, critical concentration, then it will lead to deficiency symptoms. And in this case, there will be no problem. But let us take the case of micro elements. Now, micro elements, they may be also in high concentration or they may be in a low concentration. when there is a low concentration, it will naturally lead to deficiency symptoms. And we have discussed also deficiency symptoms. But when it will be high, so when it will be high, because we have to now recollect the definition. Microelements means they are present less than 0.1 milligram per gram dry weight of the plant body. Less than 0.1 milligram. That means when it will be very low, it will lead to deficiency symptoms. But when it will be high, it will be greater than this concept. That means it will come to this 1 to 10 milligram. Then what will happen? It will lead to toxicity. This is the difference between the macro and micro elements. This is toxicity. That means in case of macro elements, in both cases, in macro and micro elements, if there will be shortage of the element, it will lead to deficiency symptom. But if the elements will be more in amount in the plant body, in case of macro elements, there will be no problem. But in case of micro elements, it will lead to toxicity. So what will be the definition of toxicity? Toxicity means when due to the excess presence of a particular element, the dry weight of the plant body is reduced by 10%. Toxicity means reduction in dry weight of the plant body by 10%. By 10%. Then only we'll call it as the toxicity symptom. But here one problem arises. In the case of deficiency of macro and micro elements, some symptoms are there. Now when there will be toxicity due to the excess quantity of micro elements, some symptoms will be there. So how can we know that this particular symptom is due to toxicity or due to deficiency symptoms? Now let us give some examples how it becomes very difficult, critical to know whether it is due to toxicity or due to deficiency. Now suppose let us take the case of manganese toxicity. An example, let us take manganese toxicity. When manganese becomes excess, manganese is a microelement. When it becomes excess, usually what is the symptom? The symptoms are usually the brown spots on the leaves surrounded by chlorotic veins. That means the leaves, there will be some brown spots and they are surrounded by chlorotic veins. That means the veins are chlorotic, means there is chlorosis. So this is the symptom when there is a manganese is excess. That means toxicity symptom. But what happens, you see? Let us take the example number 1. When manganese competes with the iron and magnesium for uptake. That means there is a competition between iron and magnesium for uptake of the element from the soil. There is competition. This is number 1. Now take the second case. Again, the manganese it competes with the magnesium for binding with enzyme. That means where manganese and magnesium, they will compete with each other to bind with a particular enzyme. That means if manganese will bind, then there will be no action of the magnesium, or vice versa. Now let us take the third case. Now the third case is when the manganese also it inhibits uptake of calcium. That means from these three, what is the conclusion you see? When manganese concentration is high in the plant body, three things are happening. Number one, iron and magnesium quantity becomes less because it competes with for uptake. Second is it competes with the magnesium for the enzymatic activity. And the third is it inhibits uptake of calcium. That means the conclusion is when there is excess manganese, there will be deficiency of iron, then magnesium and calcium. That means when there is a manganese quantity is excess in the plant body, side by side there will be deficiency of iron, magnesium and calcium. So when this symptom appears, suppose here the symptom is a brown spot on leaves with surrounded by chlorotic veins. So whether this symptom is due to toxicity of manganese or due to deficiency of iron, magnesium or calcium, how will I ascertain it? It is very difficult. So therefore, it is difficult to identify whether it is due to toxicity or the deficiency. Very difficult. So we have to see what are the actual deficient symptoms and whether it is due to toxicity. Suppose a particular symptom is due to deficiency, and we will go on adding the one which is suppose one deficiency is due to this excess of this, but we will think that it is due to some other element. So it leads to confusion. So it is very, very difficult. So this is all about the discussion of these different symptoms of toxicity and the deficient symptoms. Now let us discuss questions. So one question is deficiency of copper leads to A choice chlorosis, B choice necrosis, C choice inhibition in cell division, and the fourth one is delayed flowering. So this is one question. The second question you can take: which of the following element is not required for delayed flowering. So A choice nitrogen, B choice sulfur, C choice you can write the manganese, and D choice molybdenum. So to answer all these questions in the very beginning, also I have told you that in this chapter you have to remember a lot of things, and every year some questions are coming from this chapter. So thank you very much for watching the video. God bless you. Have a good day.